You are not late. You are not broken, and nothing has gone wrong. You are standing at the edge of a realization so quiet, so simple, that most people miss it entirely, and because they miss it, they spend years trying to fix their lives instead of changing where they are living from within. This moment, right now, is not an accident. Something in you is ready to stop chasing and start occupying. And by the end of this journey, you will understand why the world has been waiting for you to move first, not outward, but inward. Stay with me until the very last moment, because what will be revealed at the end is not a technique, not a belief, not a method, but a position of consciousness that makes effort unnecessary. There is a tiredness that sleep does not cure, a weariness that rest does not touch. It lives beneath motivation, beneath hope, beneath discipline. And if you are honest, you know it. You have tried to think differently. You have tried to imagine better. You have tried to stay positive while nothing seemed to move. And the exhaustion crept in quietly, not because you failed, but because you were trying to create a new life while standing in the same inner place. That kind of tiredness is not weakness. It is information. It is the body and the consciousness saying, you are trying to move the world without moving yourself. Reality does not respond to effort. It responds to position. Not the position of your body, but the position of your awareness. Most people never hear this. They are taught to push harder, visualize longer, repeat louder, control the mind more aggressively. And when nothing changes, they assume they are doing it wrong. But the truth is far simpler and far more liberating. You cannot force reality to change while you remain internally loyal to the identity that produced it. And that loyalty is subtle. It hides in the way you wake up, in the way you anticipate the day, in the way your shoulders tighten before anything even happens. It hides in your default state, the place you return to when you stop trying. That place is who you are being, and the world has been responding to that all along. Many people say, I'm exhausted from manifesting. But manifestation does not exhaust. Trying to be someone you are not yet willing to release, that exhausts. Trying to imagine abundance while still living as the one who waits. Trying to feel loved while still identifying as the one who hopes to be chosen. Trying to feel free while still occupying the inner posture of survival. That friction is what drains you, because consciousness cannot expand under force. It expands when it changes location. Not tomorrow, not when the evidence arrives, but the moment you stop insisting and start relocating. And here is where the misunderstanding begins. Most people believe persistence means repeating the same practice from the same internal state. But persistence without movement is not persistence. It is stagnation wearing the mask of discipline. The body knows this before the mind does. The tight chest, the shallow breath, the subtle panic beneath affirmations. Those are not signs of alignment. They are signs of staying. You were never meant to push reality forward. You were meant to step into a different place and let reality follow. And here, right here, is where I want you to pause with me for a moment. Not to analyze, not to fix, just to recognize. If this resonates, if something in you feels seen rather than instructed, then take a breath and make a quiet declaration. Comment one short phrase that describes what you are choosing now. It can be as simple as rest, certainty, enough, it's done. Not for the algorithm, not for anyone else, but because consciousness responds when a choice is acknowledged. There is a moment when techniques stop being tools and start becoming crutches. You know you have crossed that line when imagination is no longer creative. It is soothing. When you affirm not to move, but to survive the day. When visualization becomes emotional first aid instead of transformation. At that point, the practice feels heavy. What once felt hopeful starts to feel obligatory. And slowly, quietly, the imagination, which was meant to liberate, is reduced to a coping mechanism. This is not failure, it is feedback. Imagining from lack produces more lack, not because imagination is flawed, but because the starting point has not changed. Consciousness does not respond to words, it responds to where the words come from. If the inner posture is desperation, the world echoes continuation. And this is why doing more often produces less. When the state truly changes, the compulsion to practice disappears naturally, not because you gave up, but because you arrived. The correct state does not demand maintenance, it sustains itself. And when someone says, "I have to keep reminding myself," it is not persistence, it is evidence that the old address is still active. Which brings us to one of the most important distinctions you will ever understand. A state is where you visit. An identity is where you live. A state can be accessed temporarily, during meditation, visualization, a moment of hope. Identity is who takes over when you stop trying, and consciousness always stabilizes where it feels familiar, even if familiar is painful. That is why people can touch peace and then immediately return to anxiety, touch confidence and then slip back into self-doubt. The return is automatic, and nothing sustains until the return point changes. You cannot build a future from a place you keep leaving. This is why affirmations can feel false, not because the words are wrong, but because the speaker is still the same. Consciousness refuses to carry two self-concepts at once, and it will always choose the one you return to unconsciously. This prepares us to see a mistake so common and so subtle that it derails almost everyone. Many imagine the end correctly, but from the wrong identity. They see the fulfilled desire while still being the one who longs for it. The body reacts, tightness, emotional strain, a strange sadness disguised as gratitude. Those tears are not relief, they are grief for a life not yet lived. When the state is correct, imagination is not intense, it is ordinary. The fulfilled desire feels obvious, normal, unremarkable. If you have to emotionally convince yourself, you are still imagining from the problem. The error is not imagining. The error is imagining to fix reality. Consciousness does not move to correct, it moves to occupy. And this single understanding, truly felt, dissolves years of struggle. You do not change life by pushing it. You change life by relocating your awareness. The world is not something you negotiate with. It is something that mirrors where you stand. And when you step into a new place internally, the reflection reorganizes automatically, without force, without strain, without effort. This is the beginning, and in the next movement, you will learn how to change locations without effort, why resistance disappears when you stop trying, and how to recognize, with absolute clarity, when the shift has already occurred. Because once you see it, you can never unsee it. There is a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when effort stops being required. Not because the desire disappeared, not because you let go, but because you quietly stepped out of the role of the one who needs. This moment does not arrive with fireworks, it arrives with relief. A soft exhale you didn't know you were holding, a loosening in the chest, a sense that nothing needs to be pushed right now. Most people miss this moment because they are waiting for excitement, but excitement belongs to wanting, relief belongs to having, and consciousness recognizes itself only in what feels natural. That is why force never works for long. Force is foreign to fulfillment. You were never meant to strain yourself into a new life. You were meant to step into it. Think of it this way. Imagine you have lived for years in a small, cramped room, low ceiling, heavy air, windows that barely open. You learned how to survive there, how to breathe shallowly, how to crouch without noticing. Then one day, you walk into a vast open space, high ceilings, fresh air, light everywhere. At first you don't relax. Your body still braces. Your shoulders stay tight. Not because the room is unsafe, but because your nervous system hasn't updated the address yet. This is what happens when consciousness moves. The new state is entered instantly. But the body and habits take time to recognize that you no longer live in the old one, and this is where most people panic and retreat. They feel the unfamiliar calm and think, I'm losing momentum. They feel the absence of urgency and think, I'm giving up. But urgency was never power. Urgency was fear dressed as motivation. True movement is quiet. True alignment feels almost boring at first, because drama was never part of fulfillment. Drama belongs to becoming. Peace belongs to being. When Neville spoke of living in the end, he was not describing a mental exercise. He was describing a relocation of self, a withdrawal of identity from the one who waits, and a settling into the one for whom it is normal. Normality is the signature of reality. If it feels extraordinary, consciousness has not accepted it as real yet. And this is where the training begins. Not a training of imagination, but a training of residence. You do not ask, how do I feel the desire fulfilled? You ask, who am I when this is no longer a question? The answer is never emotional fireworks. It is neutrality, stability, a quiet sense of course. So let's make this practical, not as a technique, but as an orientation. There are always two internal locations available to you. The first is the one you know well. It is the place of monitoring, of checking, of subtle tension and anticipation. Even on good days, something there is alert, watching reality, measuring distance. The second location is different. There is no scanning, no internal commentary, no sense of almost. Life simply unfolds. The mind is present but not gripping. The body moves without resistance. Your task is not to create the second place. It already exists. Your task is to recognize when you are in the first and step out. Not with effort, with permission. The moment you notice tension, you do not fix it. You ask a single question: where am I living from right now? Not emotionally, not intellectually, energetically. And then, without argument, you choose again. This is not repetition, this is relocation. At first, the mind will pull you back. That is not failure, that is habit. You have lived at the old address for years. Of course it calls you home. But here is the key, the one most teachings never emphasize. You do not fight the return. You simply leave again. No drama, no self-judgment, no analysis, just leaving, again and again. And something remarkable happens. The second location starts to feel more familiar than the first. The calm becomes normal. The absence of urgency stops feeling suspicious. And one day, often without noticing when, you realize you did not return. This is when the markers appear. Not signs in the world, signals within. The first marker is rest, not sleepiness, rest. The nervous system stops bracing. Thoughts slow without being controlled. The mind no longer circles the desire. It trusts something it cannot explain. The second marker is loss of urgency. You stop checking timelines, stop needing reassurance, stop scanning for proof. Not because you gave up, but because nothing feels threatened. The third marker is natural language shift. You stop saying, I'm trying, I'm hoping, I'm working on it. And without forcing it, you begin to think and speak as someone already situated, not affirming, assuming. This scares some people. They think calm means complacency, but calm is coherence. The old state required vigilance, the new one does not. And this is where something beautiful and unexpected begins to happen. Life starts moving without your involvement. Conversations arise, opportunities surface, ideas come uninvited, not because you attracted them, but because you can now see them. The state you were in before filtered them out. You were too busy trying, too focused on lack. Now perception opens. This is not passivity, it is action without friction. You do what needs to be done, but without internal resistance. And the simplicity of it almost feels suspicious, because you were taught that transformation must be hard, but difficulty was never a requirement. Misalignment was. Now, right here, I want to mark something important. If you feel a quiet recognition happening, if something in you is softening instead of striving, this is exactly the point where many people are ready to anchor the shift, not by effort, but by structure. And this is why, at this moment in the journey, I want to invite you, gently, without pressure, to go deeper. In the description and the pinned comment, you'll find access to a 21-day inner relocation challenge, not to fix you, not to push results, but to stabilize this new place so it becomes your default residence. If you feel called, it's there. And now, without pause, without interruption, let's continue. Because the next realization changes everything. You were never blocking reality, you were standing in front of it. And in the next movement, you will understand how getting out of the way allows the bridge of events to form, naturally, effortlessly, inevitably. There is a moment when you realize the world was never resisting you. It was waiting for you to move, not forward, not upward, but aside. Most people stand directly in front of their own becoming, pushing, demanding, trying to make something happen, unaware that their effort is the very obstruction. Consciousness does not require pressure, it requires space. And space appears the moment identity loosens its grip. You see, the old self, the one who tries, hopes, waits, fixes, believes it must be present for life to work. But that self is not the creator, it is the manager. And managers do not create reality. They monitor it. They interfere, they slow it down. The instant you stop identifying as the one responsible for making things happen, something extraordinary begins. Life steps forward, not dramatically, not loudly, but decisively. This is what Neville called the bridge of incidents. Not a path you plan, not steps you orchestrate, a sequence that unfolds because you are no longer in the way. When the state changes, the bridge does not need effort to form. It forms because it must. Reality has no choice but to rearrange itself around the position of consciousness now occupied. And here is the part that dissolves fear. You do not need to see the bridge. You do not need to understand it. You do not need to trust blindly. You only need to remain where you are now. Most people sabotage this phase because it feels unfamiliar. They feel the absence of struggle and think something is wrong. They feel detached from the desire and panic, believing they are losing it. But detachment is not loss, it is arrival. The fulfilled state is not emotionally loud, it is emotionally stable. And stability feels strange to those addicted to anticipation. There is a quiet courage required here. The courage to not go back. The courage to let the old identity dissolve without replacement. Because for a brief moment, you are neither who you were nor fully adjusted to who you are becoming. This is the void Neville spoke of. Not emptiness, neutrality. And neutrality is fertile. In neutrality, imagination stops working for you because it is now working as you. You no longer imagine to get, you imagine because it is natural, often without noticing. A fleeting assumption, a casual thought, a simple expectation. And these small, unforced assumptions are far more powerful than intense visualization ever was. Why? Because they come from resonance, not desire. The old self imagined upward. The new self imagines from within. And the world responds differently. This is when people say, "It happened when I stopped caring." But that is not accurate. They did not stop caring. They stopped needing. And need was the only barrier. Here is something rarely said, but deeply freeing. You cannot be abandoned by what you have already become. When the state is occupied, there is no fear of loss. because loss only applies to something external. This is internal. This is identity. This is who you are being. And identity does not disappear overnight. It dissolves through irrelevance. You do not kill the old self. You outgrow it. You stop returning to it. And because consciousness feeds what you return to, what you abandon starves quietly. No fight required. Now something subtle begins to occur in the external world. Small shifts first. Tone changes in conversations. Responses soften. Timing adjusts. Nothing dramatic, but unmistakable. These are not manifestations. They are reflections. Reality aligning itself to the new position. And this is where many people try to interfere again. They notice movement and think, I should do more. They notice progress and reintroduce effort. But effort belongs to the old role, the role you have left. The new role is simpler. You respond. You do not chase. You move. You do not push. You choose. You do not convince. Action still happens, but it happens after alignment, not before. This is inspired action, not because it feels exciting, but because it feels obvious. There is no internal debate, no emotional charge, just clarity. This is how the bridge unfolds, one step at a time, often without you realizing it is part of anything larger. And then one day, sometimes suddenly, sometimes gradually, you notice something profound. The thing you once strained to imagine is now just there, not as a miracle, as a fact. And what shocks people most is not that it arrived, it's that they are no longer emotionally overwhelmed by it, because consciousness adjusted before the world did. This is the secret hidden in plain sight. You do not become happy because life changes. Life changes because you have already become. And now, before we move into the final movement, where everything integrates, I want to anchor this moment gently, not as instruction, as recognition. If you feel yourself standing differently inside, if effort feels less relevant than presence, then pause with me for one breath and silently acknowledge, I am no longer standing where I used to stand. You do not need to comment this one. This is between you and you, because from this point forward, the journey is no longer about change, it is about staying. And staying is the most powerful act of all. In the final movement, you will understand how to remain without strain, why permanence creates inevitability, and how choosing to stay aligned becomes a way of life, not a practice. Because when you live from this place, the world cannot help but follow. There comes a moment when the journey stops feeling like movement. Not because nothing is happening, but because you are no longer leaving yourself. This is the place few reach, not because it is difficult, but because it is quiet. There is no urgency here, no inner negotiation, no constant recalibration. You are simply where you are. And from this place, life unfolds with a kind of inevitability that feels almost intimate, as if reality itself recognizes you. This is not mastery, this is belonging. Most people believe power must feel forceful. They imagine confidence as loud certainty, faith as emotional intensity, alignment as constant positivity. But real power is gentle. It does not announce itself. It does not need reinforcement. It is felt as steadiness, the absence of inner contradiction. When identity stabilizes, effort dissolves. Not because you refuse to act, but because action no longer fights who you are. You do not wake up wondering how to be aligned. You wake up already there. And when challenges arise, because life still moves, they do not pull you back into old roles. They are met from the new position. This is the true test of identity change. Not how you feel in silence, but how you respond when something presses against you. And here is the quiet miracle. When the state is stable, triggers lose their authority. They still appear, but they no longer decide where you live. You notice them and remain. You feel emotion and remain. You experience contrast and remain. This is permanence, not rigidity, residence. And residence is what creates inevitability. Reality cannot override a consciousness that no longer oscillates. It must reorganize around it. This is why Neville emphasized persistence, but not in effort. Persistence in being, persistence in staying, persistence in refusing to return to the old address, not angrily, not defiantly, but naturally. Like someone who has moved cities and no longer feels the pull to visit the old street. Not because it was bad, but because it is no longer home. When you stay, something extraordinary happens. Time stops being a concern. You are no longer waiting for proof, because proof belongs to doubt. Certainty does not need confirmation. It lives as assumption. And assumption is the language reality understands. You stop asking, when will it happen? Because the question no longer makes sense. From where you are now, it already has. And this is the paradox that frees you. The future does not arrive to convince you. It arrives because you no longer need convincing. Many people fear this stage. They worry that if they stop wanting, they will lose momentum. But wanting was never momentum. Wanting was movement without arrival. Being is what moves the world. Now notice something subtle. As you remain here, your desires change tone. They become quieter, cleaner, less charged. Some fall away entirely, not in disappointment, but in completion. You realize you were reaching for symbols, not essence. And now that the essence is lived, the symbol is optional. Other desires remain, but without desperation. They feel like natural extensions of who you are, not solutions to who you are not. This is how expansion happens without strain. One state giving birth to the next, not through hunger, through fullness. This is how life grows you.